so confident they'll make the playoffs that if they don't, I'll wear a Giants or a Dodgers jersey on one of our podcasts.
You don't need the pressure of always trying to perform here at the major league level, so that might be a good thing.
You talked about the athleticism of this Padres team last time out, and he just embodies it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the BCSC podcast. We are live in San Diego in Padre Land. We are live on Twitter as well, coming to you on Spotify and Apple. My name's Andy Bishop. I'm hosting today's episode, and we have a special guest. She is a writer. She's an insider. She covers the Padres for Last Word on Sports. It's been a couple weeks since we've talked here on the BCSC. There you see her. Lacey Yahnke, thank you for joining us here at the Best Coast Sports Connection. Where are you coming to us from today?
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm coming to you guys from Santa Clara, California. I go to school up here at Santa Clara University, but I'm from San Diego. I live pretty close to Pacific Beach. Lived there my whole life. So yeah, coming to you from Santa Clara, California today.
Wonderful, PB. We love it. Okay, Lacey, you write for the Padres, essentially. Tell us what that entails a little bit. As I said, it was for Last Word on Sports. What's it like covering the Padres?
Yeah, so I work for a company called Last Word on Sports. It's a small sort of startup blog site, and they have a writer from every team cover all 30 teams in the Major League Baseball. And so when I first got involved, I was pretty excited to, try and work primarily for the Padres. Obviously, I was willing to kind of write for any team at that point, but I was, kind of put my word in for the Padres, knowing, how exciting this team was going to be, in future coming years. And so I was lucky enough to be assigned through Last Word on Sports to cover them. And right now it's a little different with the off season. Primarily we do one article to kind of depends on, what I feel most comfortable. And with my crazy college schedule, it's a little different each week, but I write roughly one article per week during the season. And then during the off season, it's one every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on my schedule. But as I said, I'm going to be a senior here at Santa Clara. So my schedule's opening up a little bit in the spring, so hopefully I'll be able to write a little bit more. But yeah, it's such an exciting team to cover right now. I mean, it's arguably the most exciting team in baseball. So very, very lucky to work with Last Word on Sports and cover the Padres.
Yeah, that's awesome. Crazy, amazing offseason for the Padres. We'll dig into some of those moves, especially what's happened recently. We know the big news with Fernando about a week ago or so. I do want to ask you, though, first, Lacey, what got you to where you are now? Like, what was it like growing up here in San Diego? How did your sports career start? And then how did it blossom heading into the collegiate level?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my sports background is fairly unique, I'd say. I actually started playing baseball when I was around 5 years old. My parents stuck me in t-ball, and I was just one of the kids out there running around, goofing off in t-ball. And back at the time when I didn't really know that I was playing baseball as the only girl. And then around the time 10, 11 years old, when girls typically switch to softball, I actually never switched to softball and stayed playing boys baseball all the way through my sophomore year of high school, just going into my sophomore year of high school. And I played pretty much as the only girl my whole life, growing up around different travel ball teams in San Diego, going out to Poway, Escondido, Carlsbad, Del Mar, traveling all around San Diego playing baseball with the boys and playing on different travel ball teams. And then I got involved with the U.S. Women's National Team in North Carolina, training with them for a couple years. Actually went over to Japan and played in a Friendship World Cup series with with a bunch of other women's baseball programs. So baseball has been, a huge part of my life. I grew up I've gone to spring training actually every year since pre-birth. I think I went to spring training games when I was still in my mom's stomach actually. And we'd go to spring training every year. My parents my mom's actually a big Cubs fan, so we grew up watching the Cubs a lot. But spring training was always, a huge part of my spring. I would just always look forward to going to games. Grew up going to Petco. So San Diego in terms of baseball is just pretty near and dear to my heart. Actually having played the game and having that experience really like informed a huge perspective of why I wanted to become a sports writer myself. And so I think, right now I run track and field for Santa Clara University. I transitioned into running. But at this point, baseball is my number one passion in terms of sports, and a huge reason why I want to become a sports writer, and really want to use baseball as a stepping stone into my career moving forward after graduation. So pretty crazy story, but yeah, Petco and the San Diego Padres are pretty home base to me.
That's awesome. Lacey Yahnke, our special guest, playing ball with the boys, and now she's taking it to the podcast realm. And I won't make a big deal out of this because it's not that big of a deal, but you are our first female guest on this podcast that we've been doing for 18 months. I've asked a few other girls, they just didn't work out. So thanks for saying yes to cool things. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I promise we're not like sexist pigs over here at the BCSC. We're all about women in sports. So yeah. Okay. We got to dive into Padres talk. Fernando Tatis Jr., my hero at only 22 years old, signs what Peter Seidler or AJ Preller called the statue contract, right? To where hopefully we'll see a statue of him out at Petco Park one day. 14 years, $340 million to be the face of this franchise and also the face of Major League Baseball. What was your reaction when you first heard the news, Lacey?
I was really fired up. I actually, I feel like a lot of, I live in a house of all girls here, and a lot of people in Santa Clara just don't really know a ton about Padres baseball. But I was running up and down my house, telling people, oh my gosh, the Padres just signed the best player in baseball for life. This is crazy news. And people were looking at me with, wide eyes, like, okay, what does that really mean? But I called my family right away. They were all pretty fired up as well. And they live back in San Diego too. So I'm sure, downtown was probably a fun area to be around when that news broke. But I think now that I'm thinking about it more and have thought about it for over a week now, I think the reason why this is so monumental for San Diego is just this really solidifies the Padres as, long-term contenders. Not a single move that, there hasn't been a single move that solidifies this future than locking Tatis up. And the fact that, he's the face of baseball, 5-tool player, probably more than I would even say that 5-tool player is cutting him a bit short. The guy is just a complete package. And, if you think about the other guys that, he's sort of been in conversation with, Mike Trout, Yelich, Bellinger, Soto, he's right up there with those slugging percentages and those numbers. And to be able to do that in only 2 seasons of being in the majors is pretty remarkable. So I think overall my reaction was just, complete excitement right away, as probably most people were.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And here's the deal. He hasn't even played a full season in terms of the numbers of games. I forget what it is. He's played 121 or 123 games. There you go. I'm way off. Yeah. But, his rookie season was cut short, and then he only played 60 games last year. So crazy. That's unheard of to get that huge of a contract with that little playing time. It was funny the day it happened. I was actually talking with a buddy the day before at work. We're both huge into Padres and sports in general. And we were talking about Tatis, and there had been rumors, that they were going to sign him to this long-term deal.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what the number was going to be, but you've seen a contract for Patrick Mahomes in the NFL for what, 450, 500. Mookie Betts was signed last year for 385. And we're like, it would be crazy if his contract is anywhere near those numbers. And it was so funny that next day I was busy at work. He sends me the text of the breaking news, 14 years, 340. And it was just so funny. We'd been talking about it the day before. And the fact that it came true the next day was pretty funny for us. But yeah, I'll echo your sentiment a bit in terms of what this ownership group has done recently. Right. And especially as Seidler is kind of taken over as the face of the ownership group. I actually, the location I work at, Peter Seidler frequents that place. And I saw him a lot this offseason or late in the 2020 season. And I work at this place, so I wasn't going to bother him. But if I see him again at this location that I work, I will give him the biggest thank you of all time for the commitment that they've put into the Padres over the last few years, and then finally building it up into the team they put on the field right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I forget, the exact quote that he had said in that press conference, but he pretty much acknowledged, San Diego is not a small market, franchise anymore. Like he said something like, this is the 8th largest city in America. It's time to really generate a winning culture. And I think that's just, something that goes to show, everyone from the ownership top down, Seidler, AJ Preller, all the way down to Jace Tingler, like everyone's really recognizing that, San Diego is turning into a place where winning is expected. Winning is hugely desired by, the fan base and this team. And all these moves that this program has made in the last, 3 or 4 months in the off season, it's just been unreal. And yeah, I think San Diego fans have been hungry for it. We've been hungry for a winning culture for so long that, now is finally our time. And it's awesome that the ownership, is backing that.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to see, because we are a city who traditionally just hasn't had good sports teams in general. And it's even more satisfying. Brian Vilvan, who I normally host this podcast with, he and I have talked it over so many times, and it's so annoying that the Chargers didn't step up and figure out a way to stay in San Diego when the Padres, were in certain positions over the years, even right before Petco was built, the Padres could have left town. So to see a franchise commit to a city even more so, that's a big part of it for me. When I've seen a team that had success in the Chargers, obviously a different sport, and they just decided to leave town for supposedly greener pastures. It's cool to see how amazing of a team and city it's going to be here in the coming years. So let's dig into the team a little bit more, as someone that covers them pretty in depth. Obviously the signing of Tatis, and then earlier this week they added a couple pieces to the bullpen, Mark Melanson and Keone Kela, who are going to join, Drew Pomeranz, Emilio Pagan, and guys. What do you think about those moves, Lacey?
I think initially, right when that news broke, I thought back to my first piece that I actually wrote with Last Word on Sports. And one of my, sections of that article was talking about how sort of broken the bullpen was even last year. And there was tons of struggle with, late August when I had started working for Last Word on Sports. That's sort of what my idea was with this article. Like, this bullpen is really struggling here. There's not much depth, and they can't hang on to win games, and they can't win, can't close games. And so that's when AJ really, made those major trades and really fixed what was broken there. But I think, these moves are important because, I think it's going to be important to emphasize this wide depth that the Padres have, because 160 games is a lot different than 60, especially with hopes for another postseason push. They and the Padres opened up their season with 24 games in 25 days. So having that depth, late in the summer plus late in the postseason is going to be like absolutely crucial. And I think some of these guys in that bullpen could really sort of help relieve some of the that starting rotation. Mark Melancon, he's 35 years old. I think he saved 10 or 11 games for the Braves last year. But I think what's important for him is like he's not gonna come in and like overpower any hitters at the plate. I think he's really like definitely a pitch to contact kind of guy. He's definitely going to force ground balls. He's good at producing ineffective contact. He's good at generating some of those outs that the Padres are going to need coming off of their 1 through 5 starting rotation. And then Keone Kela, I think I haven't actually done as much research on him as I probably should, but seems like he's got a relatively low ERA when he's healthy. Seems like he's got a pretty good arm that could definitely, he could definitely be handed the ball, late in games when, Snell or Musgrove or Paddock or Lamet, are done throwing. So, and then obviously you got, the bullpen from then on out is just incredibly deep. Mackenzie Gore, depending on what happens with him, Ryan Weathers. And then we got this, Adrian Morahan, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He could also take that 6th spot in that starting rotation. And then, as you mentioned, Emilio Pagan, Pierce Johnson, Drew Pomeranz. So I think, like, ultimately, when I think back to that article that I had originally, written, I'm pretty blown away by how far we've come in terms of really addressing that bullpen issue. And I think that's what's going to, allow us to win these ball games, especially close games against, so many good teams in the NL West. It's like we're going to have to close and come out strong with that 7, 8, 9 innings after, those starters go deep into games. So I think those 2 additions are pretty crucial. They both add, pretty different, components to the mix. As I said, Melanson's more, pitch to contact kind of guy. Kela seems like more of a fastball, hard thrower. So it seems like those 2 could be good additions to the bullpen there.
Yeah, I dig it. Melancon with a lot of playoff experience as well. And as you said with Kela, does well when he's healthy. Last year he was out for most of the season, and then I think in 2019 he had like a 2.12 ERA. So yeah, definitely love the depth there. And so it's hard to know, right? Like right now who the 7, 8, 9 guys are going to be, or if there even is going to be that with, so many arms that can occupy those innings. But, we know what we have from the guys that we saw last year, especially Drew Pomeranz, who it was so good to see him have a successful year, especially when he signed that 4-year, $34 million contract going into the year. So love what we're seeing from those guys. Lacey, you mentioned a couple of the starters here for the Padres. And so, of course, right when the Padres seem like they could be the best team in Major League Baseball, you have their bigger brother for so long, maybe not so much now, but the Dodgers are thought to be the best team in the league by most, especially after winning the World Series. So I want to talk about the starting rotations for both teams, especially since the Dodgers signed Trevor Bauer to a 3-year, $102 million contract but he's got like buyout or opt-out options with this contract, kind of a definitely a Trevor Bauer contract for sure. Okay. So Padres, we pretty much know the 1 to 3 for them: Darvish, Snell, Lamet, in a certain order. Who knows what it'll look like this year. And then Chris Paddock and Joe Musgrove pretty much penciled in at 4 and 5 for the most part. And as you said, we could see some others in there: Morahan, Weathers, Gore. We'll see, but we'll just go with Paddock and Musgrove in the 4-5. And then for the Dodgers, their top 3 are pretty impressive too, with Walker Buehler, Trevor Bauer, Clayton Kershaw, and then Remember, they've got David Price, who didn't play last year, who's had a successful career with a couple different teams. And then their number 5, it's a little bit of a toss-up right now with Julio Urias and Dustin May, who we've seen has quite the arm. So, Lacey, when you look at those two starting 5s, how do you compare them?
It's tough to look at these two starting rotations because the Dodgers are just so dominant in these areas, and I think if we're thinking about Walker Buehler, Kershaw, Bauer, I think is still a little bit more of a wild card than people are giving him credit. I mean, I know he had a great year last year, but his numbers in the years prior aren't super consistent. So I'm still kind of holding out for him. Plus, just his relationship with the Dodgers and everything is going to be pretty interesting to see that move forward. But I think LA has somewhat of an advantage here, especially with Buehler as their ace starter. But I mean, if we're going to look at, Snell, Darvish, and Lamet, I mean, I think if Lamet's healthy, he could honestly really be the Padres ace. I think that's somewhat of a hot take. But I think his ERA last year was ridiculous. He had a 12.1 strikeouts per 9. I think he pretty much, he really dealt against the Dodgers last season too. So I think Lamet could really be more of a sleeper than I think, people are really giving him credit. I think it would probably be, pretty conservative to say that we should probably wait to see what happens with his health. I think last year, when he opted out or when he, told the Padres that he was going to call it, I think lots of people viewed that as a missed opportunity in that division series. But I think that was definitely the move for him. It seems like, at least from what I've been reading now and some of the stuff that I've been seeing from other writers, is that his slider is just pretty controlled this year, depending on if he stays healthy. And then Darvish is awesome. I think he's probably my favorite pitcher out of this rotation. His numbers are so good. I mean, what was his ERA last year? 2.01 or 2.02 or something like that. He had 11 strikeouts per 9 as well. So I think his experience, 2-time Cy Young runner-up. I think his relationship with AJ Preller is really good too. So I think, it's kind of he's kind of dependent on, what pitcher is he going to be? Is he going to be that pitcher from 2018 with the, 4.95 ERA, or is he going to be, the pitcher he showed up to be last year? So I think he could really solidify his spot as the number 2 ace. And compared with, Clayton Kershaw, it's kind of a tough matchup to go against. I mean, Kershaw is just also, lights out, but he also struggles in playoff games as well. So that matchup is going to be pretty good too. And then Musgrove, I actually don't know as much about him as I think I should at this point too. One. I mean, I think his season this year is going to really depend on what he's like, in 2019. I mean, his fastball last year got rocked. I mean, he left that thing hanging over the middle of the plate when he got down on the count pretty often. So I think he's going to have less pressure this year, though. I mean, last year he was our number 1 ace, so I think he's going to have less pressure moving into that 5 spot, which could help. But again, he's going to have to really show up this year as well. So I think, overall, I'm going to say that LA does have the advantage here. But I think the Padres' depth is going to play into their advantage huge for this season.
Yeah, great stuff. Lacey Yahnke, our special guest. She's actually not as biased as I am here on the BCSC podcast. I mean, I'll just kind of
Thanks, Rob.
reiterate some of the things you said. So I think 1-3 for both teams, like they're pretty much neck and neck. If you actually look at the numbers, career numbers, like Darvish and Bauer are pretty close to each other. And like you were saying, Bauer hasn't had like super impressive years. Maybe one year, I think like 2015, he was close to winning the Cy Young, and then he obviously won it last year. But he's had like 12-10, 9-8 type seasons. So yeah, I mean, he got the contract and he had the great 2020 season, but that was a short season. So who knows? But yeah, Walker Buehler hurt most of last year. I think he's going to come back with a pretty impressive season. And then we know what Kershaw can do. So, but like you said, Lamet, Snell, Darvish, I mean, they could all be number ones for us. I think I do just give the very slight advantage to the Dodgers in those 4 or 5 spots, especially with David Price. You know, he didn't pitch last year like we said, and he could come and have a pretty strong season. I think there's just a little bit of uncertainty, like you said, with Paddock and Musgrove. But so I think like on paper and judging off past seasons, like you do give that slight advantage to the Dodgers. But, you know, we've got a lot of these young guys who a number of whom could have really good seasons, and we could end up, you know, having a better starting rotation than the Dodgers. Lots of unknown. I think we agree, slight advantage to the Dodgers. My podcast co-host Brian, when he sees this, he'll probably be rolling his eyes. But it's close. It's close, man.
I'm trying to be, you know, unbiased. I'm trying to offer my opinion as a journalist. So I think I would agree, slight edge, but you know, being a Padres fan, I'm pulling for him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of this podcast. We have people on like you who are smart and objective as journalists, and then we're the homers here just hosting this thing. So anyways, I do want to bring up this story. This is a story close to our home here at the Best Coast Sports Connection. So my buddy Brian that I normally do the podcast with, and friends who we've had on as guests, we started doing this thing like a year and a half ago. We were like, hey, let's just start doing a podcast. Let's find a cool sports bar and restaurant to record it and film it from. You know, we wanted to have a cool backdrop with jerseys, something that's just like quintessentially San Diego. So I had lived in Mission Valley right near the stadium, and there was this bar, McGregors. Most San Diegans know of it. Great bar, great San Diego vibe, right next to the stadium. People would go there before and after Chargers games, Padres games, you know, when they were playing at the Q. And in talking to you, Lacey, I discovered that you have a connection at McGregors who I've talked to on a number of occasions. What's up with Uncle Johnny?
Uncle Johnny. Yeah, my uncle Johnny is a bartender at McGregors. So it was pretty funny when I was talking to Andy, you know, realizing that connection that we had, that, you know, you were kind of like, oh, you know, I don't know if you know about this bar, but it's called McGregors. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, my uncle's a bartender there. So pretty wild. Yeah. My uncle loves the Padres, also loves the Cubs. He's a huge baseball fan, probably the biggest baseball fan I know. Him and I talk pretty regularly about, you know, the season and different things about just all things baseball at this point. So, you know, he's been going to spring training games with me, you know, since I was little, and he's been going to Petco Park, you know, forever too. So, yeah, pretty special that he's this connection here. You know, he's probably going to tune into this podcast. So, pretty stoked to hear about this connection for sure.
Yeah, it'll be good to get back there. I know obviously like most restaurants here in San Diego, they've had like outdoor seating once that's been able to open up. But I haven't gone there since we did our last podcast, which, you know, was right around, you know, February, March, whenever things, you know, shut down due to COVID. So made great relationships with a lot of the people that work there, the bartenders and the waitresses and everything. So we'll definitely get back there and record some episodes. But, you know, we've been able to make it happen here with working from home and doing everything from home or office. So we're keeping the dream alive. Lacey, are there any other storylines for the Padres going into, or obviously spring training has started, but anything you're really eyeing here, like a month before the season starts?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm honestly the biggest storyline that comes to mind right away is this Dodgers rivalry. I mean, I think at this point, I'm not super sure about the schedule, but I think I've seen like we're supposed to play the Dodgers. I think Justin Turner has said, we're gonna have a rival matchup 19 different times this season, which is funny because that means that we're gonna be pretty much everyone's gonna be glued to that TV watching any Dodgers Padres game this season. But I think this rivalry is gonna be really fun to watch, mostly because of how high caliber these two teams are gonna be. I mean, the Dodgers are the complete powerhouse, but the Padres are a total package too. They're refreshing, they're exciting to watch, and their energy just radiates all over the field. So, I think, and even thinking back to that, division series last year, like when the Padres lost that series, I just feel like the team and the city just felt a shift in how they saw themselves, and the city of San Diego saw a shift in the team becoming more of a winning culture. And I think that's what really fires me up about that storyline when I think about 2020 and playing the Dodgers, because of, the different energies that these two teams bring, the styles of play, their lineup, obviously we just talked about their starting rotation, everything about these two teams. I think that's going to really bring out, the best level of baseball that, we're going to see this year. And, anytime you can watch the best of the best compete, that's truly a gift. So I think that's definitely one major storyline. Trying to think. I think also, another storyline that I'm thinking of is Mackenzie Gore. I mean, I don't know what's really going to happen with his future, but I think the Padres seem to treat him, similar to the way they're treating Tatis. They know how good he is and he can be, and especially just considering even, again, back to this argument of bullpen depth, really trying to add in, some of those players for those late inning games. I think it's going to be exciting to see where he shows up. And then also, thinking about the level of play that Tatis is going to bring. Even thinking about last year, even his relationship, with Machado and Hosmer and some of the other guys on the infield, like, it seemed like last year, when, Machado was doing well, Tatis fed off of Machado's energy. When Tatis was doing well, Machado fed off his energy. It seems like that core group is they really feed off each other. And I think that's something that we saw late in the postseason last year that is sort of, I would love to, write some pieces on, the chemistry between those players, that core infield group. And then lastly, the Jake Cronenworth, Ha-Sung Kim duo there is going to be really interesting to see, especially because Cronenworth, I think, is better offensively and could be better offensively. Kim might have a bit of a tough time adjusting to that major league style of play, but seeing where those two guys end up, seeing where where the outfield ends up, we got Trent Grisham, Tommy Pham. It's going to be interesting, seeing where all these other players end up. Jerickson Profar, another one. So I just think the key word here is depth in every direction for the Padres, and it's going to be so fun to see what AJ and Tingler do with all these position players, because there's just so many options that they can do, and I think that's the luxury that the Padres have this year that they haven't ever had. So yeah, those are a few that come to mind.
Yeah, you mentioned Preller and Tingler. It's just going to be interesting to see how this team evolves. It's a beautiful problem to have. We do have a few question marks, at second base, with how both the rotation and the bullpen are going to play out. But it's because we've added all this amazing talent. So that's the question mark,
Yeah.
But it's a good question mark, So I'm a big Jace Tingler guy. Everybody knows that here on the podcast. So I'm always interested to see what he does as a manager. So yeah, absolutely. Well, Lacey, it has been an absolute pleasure. Lacey Yahnke, our guest of honor here at the BCSC. Just talking Padres baseball. It's refreshing. We're definitely going to do plenty more of it leading up into the season. And once the season starts on April 1st, Lacey, do you have any final thoughts on anything that we've talked about today? San Diego, Padres baseball, anything?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just I'm so stoked to get back to San Diego. Hopefully, fans will be able to get back into Petco Park this year, because I think that was just even just being on some of these conferences with some of these other writers, and hearing about other writers on different podcasts and who's covering the Padres this year. It seemed the overall sentiment just seemed, every time something electric would happen in the postseason last year, everyone was like, "Oh, I wish Padre fans were here to experience this." I mean, Petco would have been going off after some of those wild card games, and any of those games moving forward, quite frankly. So I think I'm just so excited to get back to San Diego and hopefully be able to go watch some of these games here. And it's going to be a wild season. There's going to be lots of awesome storylines to cover, and I'm going to do my best to cover it all. So yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, Lacey, I've got a couple cousins, couple friends. We're talking about purchasing some kind of season or half season package, if everything works out. So we're definitely getting the itch to return to Petco Park to watch that wonderful team play in front of our eyes. All right, folks, that's going to do it. Lacey Yahnke, insider for the Padres, with last word on sports. I'm Andy Bishop. We will catch you next time here on the BCSC podcast.